Ruchem Aboim B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Ears and Shir. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Zev, especially on Dinei Nikui K'samim B'Shabbos Yom Tov, stains on Shabbos which may be clean. Today's exclusive sponsoring a shir called Egan Shir Terra 718-851-8651, email ist@yeshivanet.com.
A while ago I was by a convention for Shabbos, and the waiter did me a favor, quote unquote. He opened up the grape juice and it spilled all over my shirt. And my shirt looked more like a map than a shirt, and I had to speak twice that Shabbos. So I decided at least I'm going to do something for the Olam after if we survive that Shabbos, to learn this sugya of stains on Shabbos, which comes up very often if someone's hat fell down, someone's jacket fell down, food fell on his clothing, and there's many different scenarios. I should mention we just had Simchas Torah Shechal Be'erev Shabbos, and going into Shabbos, can you clean your shoes? If you walked into dirt, pardon me, the streets are full of tzoyas klovim. What do you do with that on Shabbos? We have Erev Pesach Shechal B'Shabbos. We'll talk about brushing off crumbs in a few minutes before the Zman, which is a question of kibbutz, of libun. So really what we have to try to clarify is, as we try to do always, to reduce it to one or two simple questions. The malacha, the rice of libun in the Mishkan, as we'll soon see, was with water. But how about if there's no water used? Let's say a person brushes off his dandruff, or brushes off crumbs, or brushes off dust from a hat. Well, he's not using water. Would that make it more mutter? And the second question is, let's say a person has a pretty nasty stain in his hat, and he just takes off part of it. So you can't say it's clean, but then again, he did do a ma'aser kibbutz, he cleaned part of the stain. So as we'll see, it's probably connected in a certain way. But like we always do, we have to look to the source. What is the malacha of malabein? So that the Mishnah says in Masechta Shabbos that basically they had to cut the wool from the sheep to make diriyas. Now we think you cut off wool and you make diriyas, but the wool is so dirty that, don't forget, the animals live in the mud, that you have to wash it out very, very well to get out any of the impurities, to make it from pretty much black. If you remember, when you go to the zoo, you see the animals running around, they're all dirty. So there are actually 3 parts of malabein, and each is negei l'maisa. The first step in laundering is you take the dirty laundry and you soak it in water. It's water, or certainly if you have cleansers. That's the Gemara in Zvachim, Tzadik Dalet Amud Beis, Shriyosoi Zeu Kibusoi. Now we gave a share about a different time, but basically merely adding water to a stain is a malacha deraisa of kibbutz. Kibbutz is a tolda of malabein. What's the pshat? Very pashut, because the stain has set in. When you put a stain in clothing, or you add water to the stain, it loosens the stain and the stain comes out. So that's soaking a dirty baguette in water. The second stage is shifshuf, rubbing, scrubbing. Like our Alta Babas, they went to the river, they soaked the water, they soaked the laundry in the river, and they rubbed it to get out the stain. That in itself is a malacha, meshafshef. The third part of it, the final finishing touches, is what's called schita, not squeezing grapes, schita mishum malabein. If you have a garment that's wet and you wring it out, so you'll see often this dirty water comes out. Why is the water dirty? Not the water's dirty, but the water that goes into the garment, you squeeze out the water, that takes out the dirt. And it's interesting, you look at the washing machine of today, it uses the same 3 stages. The soak cycle, that's Riyaseu Kibusay, the agitating cycle, that does the scrubbing, and then the spin cycle is the schita that gets out the water. It's not a dryer, but the water in a dirty garment becomes dirty, and get it out, and then you have a clean garment. So these are the 3 parts, and each one is a malacha. Schita mishum malabein. I'll give you a perfect example. Someone gets caught in the rain, and his suit is wet. Shaking out the suit is schita. Because when you shake out the water, it takes out the dirt. So now, after this brief introduction, it's pretty logical to say that malabin is only shaykh with water. After all three parts use the water. The shriya is definitely water. The scrubbing, usually when there's water, it comes out easier. And definitely schita part is only shaykh with water. But we don't just speculate. Let us learn. We have a Reicha Torah. There's a Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Mem Zayin. One of the biggest Torahs for today. Hamenar talisa b'Shabbos chayev chatos. Now that's scary. Chayev chatos is the worst thing a person could do. Rahman al-Islam. Nice way of saying chayev skila. What's wrong with shaking out a beged? Talis does not mean it. Talis gadol. Talis like shayim merchs b'talis. Any garment. What's wrong with shaking out a garment? So Rashi says, because you have afar, you have dirt or dust, and that's chatos, chayiv chatos, the zehu libuna. Libuna and malaban is the same idea. So Rashi is saying clearly, shaking out a garment without any water, shaking off the dust or the dirt is malaban daraisa, and that's Shabbat Gemara, Shabbos Kuf Mem Zayin. Tosfos, however, says no. Menar talisa means you left it out overnight. The tal, the dew settled on it. Now it's wet, and that's chayiv chatos. Why? Because you're using the dew, water, so it's a form of schita, pashit. And then he says, but when Rashi says shaking off afa, ein nira she shaykh libun. So our question is libun shaykh without water is machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. How do we paskin? Good question. So the Mechaber in our Sim and Shin Bey Sif Aleph, the Mechaber says if you shake out your talis chadosha, we'll soon explain, a new talis that's dark, shchayv is dark, from the tal is chayiv, because that's considered cleaning the beged. The Rama also adds that not only Menayer Talisoi, but a beged that fell into water, or you got caught in the rain, don't shake out the beged, that would be libun. Schita libun. So Mechaba and so far the Ramah seem to talk only about a wet garment. Now I want to make a point, because both Mechaba and Ramah mention two factors: a new garment is awesome, and if you're makbid on the stain, because the halacha is if someone has a stain that doesn't bother him, so it's not halachically dirty. If it's not dirty, you can't clean it. But this, as the halacha quotes the Yaris Devash, he says we don't know how to shatz up what's makbid. People are makbid and what's new. So he seems to say we treat every stain like a potential makbid, even though the beg is not new. So again, that's a different share to figure out what it means makbid and chadash. But we're talking about a stain that you're makbid on. The hat fell into the dust. You're makbid about it. So according to the Mechaba, dust and hat should not be a problem, because he's only talking about tal. The Ramah adds v'yesh oimrim the asla nar min avak shalav imakbid alav v'toiv lachish ledvar. A very mild endorsement. Good idea to be machmer. So up to Mishnah, I don't like the lashon. The El Yerabba says Medina there's an issa, because many Rishonim go with Rashi, and yet there's more than just what Mishnah quotes, and that's what we're going to say. La locha lamaisa, certainly for Bnei Ashkenaz and even some Sfadish Apoiskim Achoishish, Ben Ischai and the Kafachayim Achoishish for Rashi Shita, that there are two ways of libun, with water and without water. Shaking it out gets off the dust, and that's also chayav chatos. Now, before we apply Lamaisa, there's another Gemara we have to learn that will give us very clear guidance into the rest of the sugya. The Gemara says in Shabbos, 6 blot early, Kuf Mem Aleph, Titsha al gabe bigdoi, mekaskasai mi b'fnim, ve'ein mekaskasai mi b'chutz. So I'm going to use my tie, which doesn't have a stain, but imagine it does. So let's say you have a mud or a hardened piece of cholent that fell on someone's garment. So now it's sitting right here, stuck on. So there are two ways to get off the stain. The right way would do is you invert the beged like this, and you rub it on the stain itself. Just like the Alter Babas did it. They rubbed the stain like this on the stain, so you're getting the abrasion of rubbing gets off the stain. That is called mi bachutz, and that's awesome. But you're taking the outside of the garment and you're rubbing one on the other. But zok the same Gemara, but if you do it like this, and the stain is on the top, and you rub it from inside, but not on the stain itself, you go back and forth, that's mutter. Now, of course it's mutter, what are you gaining? So Rashi explains, Rashi is here, and Rashi is also in 12 places in Zvachim, but Rashi explains that the Metzias is when the food or the mud hardened, it looks very unpleasant. So you shake it, you rub it from mibafnim inside, that loosens the grip of the mud or the food on the garment, and then it falls off. And here's why it's mutter, because the stain, the actual stain that's embedded in the very fabric, did not come out. So that's Rashi's shita. If you rub it, the stain on itself, so you get off the outer surface, and also what's inside. That's real libun. But if you just invert it and go up and down to loosen the grip of the mud, food, etc., but the stain remains, so you're okay. So what's the Gemara is saying? A very pashut word, because really what's above the surface is not really in the garment. It's like, someone's by an off roof and they throw a peckle and it lands on his hat. So taking it off is not libun. Why? Because it's not in the fabric. So here, the Yesod HaDavar is that you're not really doing a ma'aser like a kibbutz. Whatever you get off above the surface was not really a problem. It just stuck on. But the stain itself, you didn't treat. The stain remains. That's why it's mutter. And that's Rashi's hezbollah. But Rashi says, you're right, you did a shinui. But since when is shinui mutter? Malabar mamish loy havi. Because you're not, there ain't nois in shamayim, and therefore there's no problem. Rashi should say that. Rashi 6 blot later, Daf Kuf Mem Zayin says beferish that it's shaykh menar talisa even without water. So Kivega both in Kuf Mem Aleph on this Gemara and on the Gemara menar talisa, he writes Sarchi and Rashi. Now for us that's a dilemma, because you can't say Tzarchin and Rashi. Rashi was Rabban Shal Yisrael, didn't forget what he wrote 6 blot earlier. But then again, you can't say B'Keveg is Kash not a Kasha. So where do you go from here? So the Hevig Chafetz Chaim and Sharetzi and Shin Beis Yivkat Memalef says L'chayra, a beautiful pshat. And he says that if you have a talis, again a beggar, a hat, and you shake it vigorously, and the stain and the dust, the dirt comes out from what's embedded in the fabric itself, that's Rashi Shita, that's a malacha deraisa. Why? Because you got out the dirt. Kibbutz is getting out the dirt. Why do you have to have water? Forget, you put water on, you might make it worse. Not the derech used water. If you have a carpet, one of these carpets in front of the house, you shake it out. So you don't need water. You shake it out well, bang it, and the dirt comes out. So it's embedded in the fabric, and you made it clean. But this case, Zok Tisharetziyim, really that only taking what's above the actual fabric. And that's not really in the fabric. That's not, the whole issa of malabain is because the wool was dirty. In fact, I once saw that after they wash it, it weighs 50% less. 50% of the fleece, the wool, is psoilus. And that's all in the wool. So you're talking about a major operation to get out what's embedded in the wool. But Rashi holds, but this case, what's in the fabric you're leaving. What's above doesn't really bother us. And that's Pshat and Rashi. So Rashi is holding, yes, that without water, avad is a malacha deraisa. Now Taisis does not seem to be convinced, and certainly there's no malacha deraisa according to Taisis, but shaking out a dirty garment that has dust embedded in the fabric, according to Rashi, is manar talisa. Now we understand both of our questions. Is water an absolute necessity? The answer is absolutely not. We paskin like the Ramah, and like Mr. Brewer says, it's awesome. If I just do part of the stain, I leave some of the stain, that's not a heta. Because if you do a ma'isa kibbutz and you do on part of the stain, it's awesome. Like doing a ma'isa boyer on part of the food. What Rashi says you left the stain is mutter. That's because when you leave the stain, you didn't do a ma'isa kibbutz. When you took it from above the surface, that never bothered us. The stain is the problem, and the stain you left. So Rashi's not saying if you leave a stain, it's mutter. Rashi's saying if you leave a stain in that scenario, you didn't do a Ma'aseh Kibbutz. So what's the problem? So here we have, Be'ez Hashem, a beautiful sugya. And again, if someone has a jacket and he rubs off and rubs off the stain that's in the garment, that's a problem. He's doing a Ma'aseh Kibbutz. The only heta is if you leave the stain and you never did a real Ma'aseh Kibbutz, that in fact would be mutter. To apply this lemaisa, let's start with the common shaila. Someone gets a wine stain, a grain stain, especially Nashma, very concerned, they might set in. So lemaisa, unfortunately, to add water to that stain could be malacha d'oraisa without rubbing. That's shriyasei zeu kibusei. So even without scrubbing, adding water to a stain, that's the Gemara, that's the sugya of shriyasei zeu kibusei. Someone had a cholent bean that stuck onto his carpet, onto his couch, and there's no plastic. So this is mamish the second Gemara. If he flicks the bean off with his finger, or takes it off even with a knife, but doesn't go into the actual fabric itself, that's the Gemara. In fact, the Gemara that we spoke in Kufam Aleph says take off the mud. You could even use the blunt part of the knife, as long as you leave the stain where it is. That is okay. Let me ask you a question, which introduces us to a big part of today's sugya. This year, I want to remind you, is our Pesach Shechal B'Shabbos. So you're going to have 2 Sudas in the morning, and a few minutes later is going to be Pesach. Now, after you finish your Suda, it's tense enough as it is, you notice you have crumbs on your jacket, on your clothing, because you ate challah. Now, could you clean it off? So, if you go into the house with crumbs, you'll be sent straight to Siberia, that's for sure. So you got to get it off. But let me tell you, crumbs on a garment, Erev Pesach before the Zman, is really dirty. It's something you really makbid on. So is it mutter to brush it off? Of course, I'm talking about you brushing it outside, whatever. There's no. So the chayra, it's a problem because you're makbid, but it doesn't make sense. Why is it taka mutter? So I'll tell you, there is a chiddush gadol which is very easy to understand for us today, and that's the Or Zarua Siman Pei Aleph. He quotes the Shita of Rashi, that if you brush off dust, it's malacha d'oraisa. But then he says something, it's hard to know the Metzias, but let's say someone has a beged meluchlach b'noitzes. The pillow platzt on him, and he's full of feathers. Mamish meluchlach, not just one or two. He's mamish, he looks like a chicken. He walks in the shul full of feathers. He can't do that. So you're allowed to clean it? So he says, Vadei mutal asiram, l'chatchil kula alma. But, why? But the same Rashi says you can't brush off dust. What's the chilik? And the Ramah in our Sif Aleph, after you can't dust off garment, but you're allowed to take off the noitzes. Zok the levush, she'ein doimel alibum, she'ein anoitzes tchuvim b'soichai, k'moi b'mayim v'ofa. The key aside is, like I told you, that libun is when it's dirty halachically, when the fabric itself is dirty. There's dust, there's dirt, there's a stain. But noitzais are just sitting on the beged. So even though we call it, wow, you're nishka mensch, you can't go like that, he's dirty. But it's not halachically dirty, and that's why it's mutter. Now, this is a sheet of the Ramah. I know the Magen Avram quotes the Sefer Zechariah, it's machmir, but almost all the poskim say, Ramah, Bnei Yisrael Yoyt V'Yad Ramah, and then you could be Saimach on that. Now, Lamaisa, a good marshal of this case, we'll use it the feather case, the Or Zarua, one of the Rishonim, is crumbs. I saw the Chutshanim, this in Karel, it's the Cheli Beis, Amid Reish and Aleph. He says, even if you have crumbs on a sweater, so it might be sticking to the sweater slightly, but it's not embedded in the actual fabric, and brushing off crumbs is not a problem. Dusting a hat, however, is a problem because the dust is in the actual hat itself. Dusting furniture, of course you shouldn't use a brush because the brush is of the chayil, shouldn't be a problem because furniture is not beileya dust, so it's on the surface, it's like feathers. Dandruff is usually the same metzias. Dandruff is basically sitting on the garment, not in it, doesn't get embedded, dust is finer, is smaller. And Taka, the Paiskim seem to say that based on this Or Zarua, we could say that brushing off dandruff is okay. Now it's interesting, because the Paiskim say, what about muktzah and all of the above? Feathers, dandruff, dirt, why is that muktzah? So the Rav Shulchan Aruch says, Machabes matter feathers because the feathers are going to be reused, so it's not muktzah. But what about dust? So people do it, he's right, if you do klachiyat, it's okay, but people do it with their hands. So the Chazon Ish has a big chiddush in Mem Zayin Chaf Aleph, and he says that sometimes when you have this type of scenario, it's bottle to the item that it's on. His mashal is sweeping. Why are you sweeping the floor? Muktzah, you're moving muktzah. So he says that it's bottled to the floor. Now, I don't know, it's hard to understand that the Shmir Shabbos and Tezvav Kuf Daled and the Shulchan Shloim, the same Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Ois Yud Gimel in Malabain. What I think he means to say is that something should be muktzah, it has to be chal. I'll use that yeshivish term, but eitzim, avonim, offer, it's there. But dandruff and dust is so negligible, it doesn't have a chalais muktzah. It's so unimportant, like, there's someone that's a garnish, but he's pretty chashiv. But a grace of garnish is just not, he's not chal, you're not goyris him. But this what the Paiskim seem to say, that maybe the dust and dandruff is so nothing, it doesn't have a shem muktzah. But kitzah, the best is right, you should shake it off kalachayad, but to do it biyadayim, it seems also mutter. You'll say, let me be from and I'll use a brush. Why should I touch the dandruff or all those other muktzah? So first of all, it's not muktzah, but here you come to a from becomes krum. So up to be Allah in the beginning of Simon Shin Beis, using a brush miyuchid is of the dechayel. So it's from Al Tiyeh Chassid, not Domei Chassid Shaita. Ein Amaretz Chassid. Next question, someone picks up a proud data, picks up the anicle, who's a diaper, and Baruch Hashem, the diaper is working, but what happens sometimes that the powder comes out, and now the proud father, grandfather has powder all over him. Or someone is preparing a simcha, whatever, even at home, and he's cutting cake, and there's confectioner sugar on it, that white sugar, and it goes on his garment. So this is a problem, because this powder and confectioner sugar is a much smaller size, and the mitzias is, it stays in the garment. It's not just, if you blow it off, some comes off, but some remains. And this would be similar to Rashi's case, Amanai Talisoi, from the dust, and this would be a problem. So this is a perfect example of Rashi's Shita. So although Rashi speaks about Afa, but who adin the powder. Now, Shlomo Zalman has a yisoid, and this is quoted in Shmir Shabbos, Tezvav or Pei, that lav dafka shifshuf is a problem, but chavit, the banging, also gets out the embedded dust or powder in the garment. So the real eitz would be, which is a partial eitz, to blow off whatever you can. So if you blow it gently, we could assume what only comes out is what's above the surface. What's embedded in the garment doesn't come out with blow, unless you blow it vigorously. But Taka, the Sefer Teres HaMalach, it's Ahmed Kufiyot, quotes from Nissen Karelitz, who says that blowing typically, unless a person blows with a great amount of koyach, but typically blowing gets off above the surface, and that we said is mutter. So the ma'ila is that you have, let's say, a white stain, powder or confectioner sugar, blowing gets off the above surface, the stain remains, so it's mamash our Gemara in Kuf Mem Aleph, that if you get out the upper part but leave the stain, it's mutter. This l'chayr is pashut. Now, the best eitzah, and this is a mitzvah l'farsim, Mishnah Berurah writes in Sif Katan Nun Hey, quoting Sefer Chassidim, one of the Rishonim, and that is eitzah toiva. Before you pick up a baby on your lap or whatever, hold the baby, put something in between. Experience shows that you try to be nice to the baby, and pardon me, so either there's a problem, a serious problem, the diaper leaks, or minimally powder's leaking is also a problem. Mr. Berurah says, quoting Sefer Chassidim, before you pick up a baby, make sure you're protected. Sometimes the baby spits up, and then you go, what should we do? I look terrible, I'm so embarrassed. So Chacham Eina B'Roshit. It's interesting, the Mishnah Berurah is very practical. In another place, if Katan Zayim, he says, since you can't shake out a garment, make sure you put your garments in a safe place that won't fall down. Put your hat in a good hat rack, not something that the fellow from the other side pushes it down. The coat, put the coat entirely onto the hanger so it doesn't fall down. Because if it falls down, you have a shaylam and our talisai. So Chacham Eina B'Roshit. And I would add my 2 cents when you're making a simcha, or even not making a simcha, you're preparing food, make sure that you're equipped, ready, that sometimes stains happen, especially confectionery sugar or oily foods. So especially preparing a simcha, like sometimes the people are not thinking. They have to look perfect, and they're makbid to look perfect, and they're preparing the kiddush with all the food, and then they say, what do I do? It spilled, I didn't know, I didn't realize. I opened the thing, cake, and everything shot at me, the sugar. So chacham ein b'roishay. Of course, if it's shaykh, to wear an apron and keep the clothing clean. Next question is a challenging question, and that is a hat got dirty. The hat blew off, and it started rolling. The kitzah, it looks like you had a hat, and you have to go to shul. So this would be a perfect example, according to Rashi, Menar Talisai and Chayev Chatos. So the real eitzah is to see that this hat is a beautiful Shabbos hat. They say if someone came to the Chazon Ish, I think it was a chassid, the offer of Shabbos, and his hat got dirty. So the Chazon Ish was a step ahead of him. He says, "Oh, let me see your hat. Your hat is such a beautiful covered Shabbos hat." Pashut, what is covered Shabbos? Shmir Shabbos. Someone walks into shul second day Yom Tov, he just took a haircut, a covered Yom Tov, or took a shave. It's even more noticeable. It's not covered Yom Tov. That's chilul Yom Tov, right? So covered Shabbos is Shmir Shabbos. To take off stain, that's malacha deraisa, is not covered Shabbos. That's chilul Shabbos. So this is the emes, and the truth is people are understanding. We come into Shabbos after Simchas Torah, and everybody looks like they've seen better days. But that's covered Shabbos. You got dance, you got dirty. That's acceptable. But if the person says, "But I can't, I'm embarrassed," whatever it is, so we have a partial eitzah. The partial eitzah would be to flick off the dirt that's stuck onto the hat above the surface, and leave at least the stain, the trace of the stain that's there, that's in the garment itself. But you have to be careful. Zalman says chavita, banging, is already a malacha. So you have to be careful to take only what's above the surface and leave the stain. Someone said a story about Rav Moshe, who once walked with Rav Moshe, and the hat flew off, and Rav Moshe cleaned it off. So it must be Rav Moshe held Kfayt Abrius. Then someone says that wasn't the case. Rav Moshe only flicked off the dirt that was above the surface, which, as we learned today, is the Pharisee Gemara. So big deal. But he didn't clean the hat, chas v'shalom. That's pashut. Now, we'll soon see if it's a situation of Kfayt Abrius. It might be mutai de akum, but I would mention now, the Mishnah Berurah already says this in Sif Cotton Vav. Mishnah Berurah makes a pashut cheshbon. Taking off dust, like Rashi, is chayiv chatas. But we have the sheet of Tosfos and the Mechaba, that's only tal, not dust. So when something is mutter, according to some Rishonim, so Amiyula Akum will be mutter in that case. We'll soon see the details with that. Now, question: someone has a sticker that's stuck onto his jacket, a price tag, whatever. Sometimes it has, today there are a lot of stickers in at homes, and he sat on a sticker, whatever got stuck to his jacket. And question number 2: he walks into the shul Friday night, and he realized there's something wrong, and he realized that last week he made Havdalah, a dripless candle, which usually dripped the most, and a few drops dripped onto his clothing. So now he has white droppings on his jacket, his pants, whatever it is. So taking off something that's stuck on, whether it's a sticker or wax. So pashit, wax is a problem. See, wax drips as a liquid, and it lands on the beged as a liquid, and definitely gets absorbed in the actual fabric. And that's why the Chutshani, as I mentioned, Cheli Beis Amud Reish Tes, is taking off shaiva from a garment. You have to be concerned about the issa of malabe. It's dirty, it's makbid, and you're taking out what's embedded in the fabric. It's like ketchup, or any type of that type of semi-solid food that sticks on the garment, and it dries, so it sticks on it and in it. The first question is hard to say with certainty, but a sticker, it really depends. They have today a Post-it, which I understand they were trying to make a strong glue that didn't work, and the mixture, whatever, didn't work. But from there they realized that you can make a Post-it that goes on and off. It's not very strong, but it serves the purpose. So a Post-it that's stuck onto one's person, or onto one's clothing, is not a problem. But a sticker that when you take it off, the fabric, the fibers come off with it, so that's embedded. I can't imagine that should be mutter. But if you have a Post-it or something like that, or a sticker that comes right off, so even though it's stuck on, you say, oh, that's a problem. That's not true. If just the above surface comes off, but the fabric itself is unaffected, and there was never a stain in the first place, that should be mutter. Gum or taffy or candies or the like in a carpet. So although, as we'll soon see, on a wooden floor, a linoleum floor, there is no kibus, because nothing gets into the fabric, there is no fabric, but a carpeting does have fabric. So here we have to realize that if the food, the gum, whatever it is stuck again in the actual fabric of the carpeting, rather that's a problem. If it just landed above it and you can pick it off and no stain ever developed, that's fine. But again, taking something that's stuck on and pulling it off is a form of kibus, because a garment is a beged gum. A carpet is a beged gama l'chol davar. That's why the truth is, I should mention, even sweeping a carpet, if there's dirt in the fibers itself or in between the different pieces of the carpeting, should be a problem. Even Laimi boy, we don't use a carpet sweeper because that's of the choil. But any type of cleaning a carpet that's really the dirt is in the actual carpet itself, that should be a problem of kibus, and that should be like something that's embedded in the actual fabric of the carpet, and that's a problem. If gum or again taffy stuck onto a wooden floor or linoleum, so Mishmur's lashon and Sivkat Memalach b'kli eitz l'kula alma ein b'shum chashash kibus, because it's not in the actual fiber itself; it's on top of it. Next question. God was it would have been a gay if today, yesterday would have been, last night would have been Shabbos. Let's say you have a snowfall, and you come into shul, and people look at you like, "Why are you coming to shul? You have an inch of snow on your hat." So the question is, can you shake out the hat and get off the snow? So l'chayra, until today, we would say, what's the problem? What's wrong with turning off my hat and shaking out snow? What's wrong? But today we realize that might be a Gemara, hamanar talisoi is chayiv chatos. But this is not like crumbs or like a feather. This is a real issa, nior, beged, that even Toisus agrees. Because the mitzvah is that snow, when you come into a building that's much warmer than outside, starts to melt. So now shaking off the hat is not an innocent action of shaking off the hat. It might be menar talisu min atal. And I should mention the Aguda in Shabbos Kuf Pei Gimel. He says dafka tal and sheleg is kibus, not dust. So he equates right away snow with tal. And it's pashut. The Rabbi says that, everybody says it's pashut. Kitzur Sharon says that, the chiddush is tal, even though there's a small amount, but snow is like rain. Everybody agrees, amanar talise from wet rain, avad is chayiv chatas. The chiddush is, the Rashi holds even dust. But that's why it's pashut. Shaking out the hat, that the snow started to melt, chas v'shalom could be a chayiv chatas. Now the only thing is, if we are hard to say we could be mitzamtzim, but let's say someone, I'll give you where maybe it could be mitzamtzim. Someone is walking outdoors within an erev, so there's snow on accumulation on his hat, so he stops and he shakes off the snow. See, in that case, since you never went indoors, so you could assume that the cold weather keeps the snow as it is. So if you could say that the snow did not begin to melt, so then the snow on the hat is like crumbs or like a peckle that landed on your hat. You're not going to say it's kibus. So shaking off the snow is okay. And Taka to be halacha in the beginning of our sim and shin beis, Taka says that. If the snow is, the snow did not begin to melt, so it's like feathers. But coming in, you have to be very careful that the only heta should be in the building when it did not even begin to melt. That would be Taka the heta. That's to be halacha in the beginning of sim and shin beis. Now, it's pashut, after a rain, shaking out a garment, person gets caught in rain with a suit and he wants to shake it off. So that is a real problem of amanar talisei. Rain is the worst. That even the Ramah is moida. The Ramah that adds on the mechaba, the rain's a problem. Now what you do is you take off the clothing and hang it up in a nice place. You got to be careful. The Shulchan Aruch and Shin Aleph Mem Hey, they don't hang garments the place where you leave garments to dry after you washed, because that would be a question of marasayim. But basically, shaking out a garment, l'chol days is a malacha deraisa. If you're wearing a plastic raincoat, shaking that out's fine, because that's not balei. Now, the old-fashioned raincoats, they call it, was really a material that had a rain repellent part to it. That could be was Beleya. You have to know the Metzias. But today's plastic, a sheet of plastic is not Beleya. The Chayr should not be a problem. Now I'm going to share with you a Shaila that you see the Nitzchi is the Shenker of our Torah. How a Shaila that Leisarim Aveiseinu Azedis couldn't imagine such a Shaila. Today is Meferish Gemara. But listen to this. Let's say a person is wearing glasses. Now we call it glasses. Granted, it's plastic, but there's no real nafkamina. Glasses, plastic, but he wears regular glasses, and his glass got dirty, and he can't see well. He's very mocked, but he wants to clean it. He's washing his glasses. Any problem with that? He's putting water on washing his glasses. No problem. Why not? Why is the kibbutz? You're washing your glasses. Teretz is, better question. Forget about glasses. What about washing plates, washing dishes? You're allowed to wash dishes. There's a Mishnah if it's Serach Shabbos. Why isn't that kibbutz? So we answer the kasha with the kasha. What's the teretz? Pashut. Teretz is the Arzerua's feather case. The issa of libun begins when it's embedded in the fabric. It's absorbed in the fabric. That's the real issa. Something that's above the surface, we have crumbs, we have feathers, we have a lot of mashallah. So we have another thing that joins the club. A plastic or a glass does not absorb. Doesn't absorb dirt. The dirt's above the surface. Dishes, plates, does not absorb. There's no absorption. There's no kibbutz. Fine. So washing glasses, you could put water on the glasses, and you could even dry it. You know, people think it's schita, but it's not schita. You're really taking the water into the garment. Just make sure there's not into the material. So a lot of water might be schita afterwards, but basically you're allowed to wash it and even dry it as long as there's no schita taking place. Let's fast forward a few thousand years, and in our times they have an idea. Why wear glasses? Let's get contact lenses. Now, originally contact lenses were made from a hard plastic. Of course, it's plastic that's non-permeable, which means plastic, if it's made properly, does not absorb. Tupperware is rubber, but the same idea. It's so strong it doesn't absorb. A hard plastic is like a hard piece of plastic. It doesn't absorb. Toys are made out of plastic. It doesn't absorb. So the chachma with the hard plastic lens is you could clean it because nothing is absorbed. It's just on the outer surface. So you rub off with your finger, take off the dirt, and it's all ready to go. Fine. But then they realize that hard plastic is not comfortable. And they make now what's called the soft plastic. It's from polymer, that's the material. The polymer, the soft lens, is extremely hydrophilic, which means it's extremely absorbent. I have in front of me the actual facts that some of the soft lenses absorb up to 70% of its weight. I don't know if you hear that, what I just said. It absorbs, 70% of it is liquid that's absorbed in the plastic. Now, how they make it, so you have to become a scientist, you figure it out. But that's the Metzias, and less man the polig. Dirt gets in. Now, not dirt from the street. See, in the natural tears of the eye, the liquid in the eye, there are proteins and lipids. You don't have to know how it works. But those things are good for the eye, but not good for lens. It gets in, and it could ruin the lens, and it could cause very serious eye irritation. So that's why people that use lenses, you have to clean it constantly. But in a hard lens, cleaning it is no problem. It's like washing dishes. But again, the new soft lenses, that 70% of it is absorption. That means there's proteins and lipid, the dirt gets in, and that's why it gets dirty, gets ruined. So now we have, believe it or not, that not only you're not allowed to rub this soft lens, but put it into a liquid cleanser. See, they have two types of solutions, those who use lenses. There's saline, that just keeps it moist, it shouldn't dry. And then there's one that's a cleanser. It cleans it. So not only you can't rub the lens because you're cleaning it, but putting it into the cleanser is a Masechtas Zvachim Tzadik Daled Amud Beis. What's that? Shriyasi Zeh Kibusa. Because you don't have to rub it. You could, but the ick is you're putting it into the cleanser. So you'll tell someone, we learned today that soft lenses is a kachim sugya. But it's true. It's Zvachim Tzadik Daled Amud Beis. And that's the Nitzchis our Torah. That everything says someplace, you have to know where to find it. Now, the emes is, we're not doing today the sugya of plastic and rubber and plastic scrubs and plastic sponges, which is a big sugya, plastic tablecloths, because it needs a share for itself. So there are some that are makel, but definitely the Kavit Shuvas, that's Rabbi Yashin, Alv Chavav, the Shevet HaLevi, and Ches Lamed Zayin, the Orchos Shabbos in the back of Chelik Aleph has a long discussion, Metzias and Halacha. They all feel that simply putting it into this cleanser could be a contemporary example of Shriyas Zeo Kibusay. And the Emes it's pashut like that. The only svara to be makel maybe is a keli, it's washing. Is it regular dirt? It's really some sort of, it's not actual dirt. So we'll leave that for now, but definitely le'eis ata, we're going to say that taka, use the simple moisturizer that keeps it moist, but definitely avoid the cleanser. Now, a person that has a stain, so obviously as we said, taking it out is definitely a problem. The question is, when a person has food that's stuck onto his clothing, or mud, especially you're walking in the mountains, even during the summer, you don't have to have snow, forget it, even during the rain, and there's mud or dirt on one's clothing. So here, we learned this earlier, but I want to clarify this, that just the fact that there's no stains, the stain remains, is not enough of the heta. The heta is take what's above the surface, again, flick it off, or even take a sharp thing and lift off the above surface, but don't actually treat the stain. What's embedded should be left there. That is the problem of libun. So if you take off the main part of the problem, and you leave the stain, it's like taking off a feather from clothing. Now, I will say, but the truth is, a feather is not attached at all. And this mud, food stain, is attached. So it's okay, so therefore what? But as long as the stain remains. Now, here is where you have an interesting chiddush that Magen Avraham said the Farish, Yoshev leizera pishtanai tafshel al ksusai mutter lekolf. You're allowed to peel it off. So some understand, and the Rav Shechner seems to, the Taz in Sif Cotton Hay seems to say this, that if Lamaisa you just do rubbing and it ends up being clean, yesh lahakol. But the Bialacha strongly takes issue with this, and he says that if you take off part of the stain that's embedded in the garment, what's the heta? So I just want to mention the Taz does have a big kula, but Lamaisa, the Miniga Oilam is like the Mishtabura, not like the Taz, even the Aruch HaShulchan seems to be makel like the Taz, but leaving the stain and taking off the above surface is the heta. Now, adding water in any situation, even if you don't scrub it, that is the issa of Shriyasai Zehu Kibusai. Now, peeling off would be any way that you're not using abrasion, you're not making shifshuf. So again, it could be flicking off, it could be blowing off. Certainly, blowing off a item is never going to take off the stain. That's the metzias. Now, someone once asked me, he had a food stuck on, and he blew it off, and he looked close, there was no stain. So he thought maybe he has to bring a chattas, he did a lav. I said, no. If you blew it off and it came off, there was never a stain. Sometimes you can have something sitting on the item, it's like a feather. So if you blew it off, it's galungin, and nothing stain ever set in the first place. Question, mud, it's a common case in the mountains or Muncie or Lakewood, when you live in muddy areas, winter and summer, and there's mud on a person's clothing. So assuming he does it carefully, he just takes off the above surface. But here the Shulchan Aruch in Siv Zayin says an interesting factor to consider. He says, okay, you're avoiding the libun issue, but when you cause the mud, the hardened mud, to crumble, that's teichen. And the Mechaber's Lashon, the Yesh Mefarshim, the Hani mean lelach. If you take off a piece of moist mud, it's fine. But if it dried, avoyavesh also to havi teichen. So the Mechaber is saying that even if there's no libun, there's teichen. Now, the assumption is lav dafka mud, even a food that hardened on the garment is a problem of teichen. It's frek the Mishtabura, as you've cut lamed, but you're not mechaven to make teichen. Mishtabura, okay, fine. It's still a malacha and sheicha legufa, and it's still an issa d'Rabbanan. So the only eights would be peel it off carefully as one piece. You know, it went on and became hard, a piece of mud or a piece of a cholent bean. You sat on a cholent bean, and it's all squashed on the clothing. So now it hardened, dried. So take it off as one piece, but don't crumble it. If you crumble it, that would be teichen. Now the big kasha on this is that if it's a food that was already nitchal namash, a piece of potato kugel, ain't teichen achat teichen. And even hardened dirt was also teichen. It started out at earth, then the rain caused it to become dirt, pieces, then it hardened, and it goes chayzer chalila. So all the Achrayim ask on the Shulchan Aruch, why is it teichen? Even if it is teichen, ain't teichen achat teichen. So Avad Mechaber knew that. So first of all, some hold yes teichen achat teichen. Some say that ain't teichen achat teichen is only a rule by food, not by karka. Gedulei karka is asa, is mutter, but karka itself is a problem. But probably the most understandable heta is ain't teichen achat teichen means you made flour, and now you made challah. So the grinding of the flour is still effective because you see you have delicious challah. But if it became back to where it started, the dirt became hardened mud became dirt. It's a solid, so the original teichen is no longer recognizable. But at the end of the day, the Mechaber did say a lashon, a pretty mild lashon. The yesh mefarshim that you should be chayshish for teichen. So that's why the Paiskim say a person should avoid making it teichen. You know it's going to crumble, don't do it. Try to peel it off. If you're trying and it wasn't a psik reisha and it happened inadvertently, so a davashen mischaven on a yesh mefarshim, you could feel okay. Of course, they ask a guy to take that off with zicha be mutter because really it's only a chumrah of teichen, even though it should be ein teichen achat teichen. Now, a situation where we have a stain that is a nasty stain, and what do you do? Is there any eitzah? So the Marshag in Chelik Beis, Nundal, you have to know Marshag's breita plates were astonishing. It was from the Gdolei Paiskim in his country, and typically he had the Koyach Te'atera, but here he takes an interesting stance, and he says, can you have a guy take off something that's a problem that's stuck on? So he says, even for a yid, like Mashal Teichen, so he says, even Teichen, if for a yid is Machan Tzvicha Legufa, maybe a guy is mutter. And then he discusses at length the sugya of Teichen that I mentioned briefly, Ayin Sham. But then he says other svaras to be makel. But then he says, at the end of all this, after he says a number of svaras to be makel, about nefesh, vada yachmel la'atzmoi, not to even ask a guy to remove the stain. But if someone has a guy removing the stain, you don't have to be marish oilemus, he says, you don't have to be marish on him. But lemaisa, if someone else does it, there's a tzas, God will kvay that brius, so let him have a guy. But the Marshag was very skeptical to have a guy remove a stain. Now the emes is, why? Maybe because Amir La'akim is always very much abused. The Min HaShemayim, it's one of the Mershainim, in Simon Yudal, the Chuvas Min HaShemayim, one of the Balei Toises, Rabbi Yankim Marvesh, asked Chuvas Min HaShemayim, Shayas Min HaShemayim, the response, and the question was, have a guy move muktzah on Shabbos, which is a typical Shvus to Shvus. So the response is, and I quote, this is Min HaShemayim, L'siga b'yod ki sakel yisakel, ayare yayare, ha'negeya b'dverim, if you play around with the Rabbanon, k'negeya b'bavas einai, with the Baruch Shalom's pupil of his eye, uv'chama v'koymes also cham chizuk dverim, yoyse mishal Torah. In other words, don't play around with Amir La'akim, even though it's a Shvus to Shvus. And you have to realize why, because that's very much abused. Someone told me, a Rav told me that people think that Amir La'akim, not just a heta, it's a way of life. You have a guy, and everything is mutter. Chas v'shalom. And the Min HaShemayim is there to remind us, maybe that's he took the strong stance, not because of the is of Teichen or per se, but it's the general attitude, call a guy. But I must tell you, and equally important, the Sholem Meshiv, also one of the Gedolei Meshivim Bizmanoi, in Madura Dalet Chelik Beis Siman Pei, has the following, a very brief tshuva, but it's astonishing. He says, Leil Yom Kippur, and this goes back, in his time there were no lights, and pardon me, someone went to the Beis HaKisei, and pardon me came out with soya on his kittel. So what does he do? He has to daven with a kittel, but he can't even daven with such a kittel. Forget about dirty, he can't daven with it. Amarti, he can have a guy wash the kittel, because it's God look for the brias. Here he is, a yid, a zopkin, an eltazay, davening without a kittel. What happened? So he says, you could have a guy wash out the kittel. Now to me this is astonishing, he doesn't spell it out, but how's a guy going to wash a kittel? He's not going to do a drabanan of teichen. He's going to wash it with water. But apparently he held that God look for the brias, the sashal devarim. What's the sashal devarim in this case? Amir La'akum. And the Kafachayim, and our Simon Shin Beis, quotes this la'alacha in Sivkot Nun Vav. So it could be it's not a machlokes. See, the Marshak stresses, tzas kvoid abrius. In other words, you look funny, okay? But the truth is Shabbos, a hat that's dirty is not funny, is a beautiful Shabbos hat. But I tell you to daven without a kittel, if he feels so self-conscious. So you have to be careful. I mean, Lamaisa, Kvoid Abrius is a very, very powerful factor. And there's a sefer, is a pirish, I say, on the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's called Mizgeres HaShulchan. So Simon Pei, Sif Cotton Pei, this is Mizgeres HaShulchan. He says, if someone has a stain, it's talking about avok, dust, which according to Rashi is chayiv chatas. To have, if someone's embarrassed to go like that, maybe you could be makel even Adai Yisrael, because perhaps he's being saimech on Tois as opposed to Rashi. Okay, now the Shir Masanim Halacha, also on the kids if cut Lamadav, he goes, I don't stand. The more makbid you are, the worse it is, not the better it is. Okay, so I wouldn't be makel Adai Yisrael for sure not, but Kvoid Abrius is a very important factor. And now let's finish a few more shilas. Shoes shilas. Simchas Torah, it goes into Shabbos, so you can't clean it Erev Yom Tov. So the emes is, believe it or not, cleaning shoes is not a problem. The dust on shoes is not a problem. Or even using a little water on shoes is not a problem. Why? Because leather shoes or plastic rubber shoes, either material is not Beileya. That's the Sugi in Zvachim, Tzadik Dalid, or is not Beileya. So if or is not Beileya, you could even take a dirty leather and put it in water. There's no din Riyasi Zeu Kibusai by leather. Now that's part of a different share, plastic, synthetic, polyesters, I'll leave that for a different time. But l'chayra, whether the shoe is leather or plastic, washing it off is not a problem. Because again, it doesn't get any of the absorbed dirt, there's very little to absorb dirt. Now, the only thing is that the Shulchan Aruch says a chiddush in Shin Bei Sif Tes, you're allowed to put water on a shoe or put shoe in water. But don't be mishafshep, don't rub it, because maybe there's a slight blia, this is a Yerush Shemayim with the Mechaba, so you're getting out some blia. But technically, there's no issa of kibus by washing off leather or putting it in water. So if someone wants, if he thinks it's a good idea, put the shoe in water, no, that's based on a Mechaba. What I should mention is to use a brush to get off the dirt of the choil. Where this is much more negeya in a very pressing way is in our city streets that's overpopulated by dogs, and there's dogs excrement soya in the streets, and someone stepped into the wrong place. What does he do with his shoes? He go into shul, he can't go into shul. So it's a very simple eitzah. Take the shoe, go down when no one's looking, go downstairs in the basement, by mikveh there, whatever, and wash off the shoe until the dirt comes off. If need be, you could take a paper towel, whatever. As long as it doesn't become rubbing vigorously, shif, that's mutter. So the dirt in a plastic or a leather shoe is not a problem. And certainly rubbers or boots, they're all either plastic or rubbers, even more mufka from the malacha. So that shouldn't be a problem. So basically there are materials like wood, plastic, rubber, that wiping it, putting water on it's okay. That's why wiping a plastic table is okay. Rubbing it vigorously is a problem. And Achrein Chaviv, let me share with you an interesting ha'ara. Someone asked me the shaila, and he didn't know how good he asked. Okay, he had a bencher, one of these the laminated plastic benchers, and obviously last week somehow some type of food got stuck in, and now it's mamash stuck onto the words of benching, and he can't see the lettering. So the question is, can he take off the hardened food from the bencher? It's a laminated plastic bencher. So I said, wow, that's a beautiful shayla. I'll tell you what, I don't think you have. He was worried about libun, which isn't the problem, because since it's laminated, it's sticking. It's like a stain. It's like a piece of gum on a floor, a wooden floor. That's not a problem. Plastic is like leather at least. But the problem is there's a different chap. The Shulchan Aruch in Shin Mem Siv Gimel says the following: if there's a blotch of ink or a shaiva wax that's blocking lettering from a Sefer Torah or Stam or Sefer, so removing that blotched ink or that wax even is moichik, because you're taking off a stain. It goes a moichik, I'll soon see why. And it's moichik al manas lichtov, because now when you take off that hard that wax or the ink, you could see the lettering. So the Mechaber, Mr. Brewer reiterates this. Taking off something that's stuck onto lettering is moichik al manas lichtov. Now it's interesting, chiddush, why do you call it moichik? You're not erasing. Because there it says erasing is lav dafka erasing lettering. It's erasing something that's obstructing. So taking off that piece of food would not be a problem mitzad our sugi of libun. It could be mitzad moichik manas lichtov. And if it's not laminated, taking off that piece of food could be a problem of libun, but also by tearing the lettering is a form of mechika. But on a plastic thing, if taka you can't read it as it is, that would be moicha amanas lichtov. I couldn't talk to you. Kaddish.
Shem Irgenshir, I'd like to begin Shekarat Smith for today's shir. Hanani ben Akash Shem Rotzakish Brokel Zakis is over here, but I'm Mr. Nemal and Echofis and Matzidkei Yagdol Teriyade.
Let's just chazor. We learned today. We learned Baruch Hashem a big sugya that basically that the issa of libun of kibbutz comes in different forms, even without water, and even merely adding water to an item is already shiyasei kibbusay. Squeezing out a wet item that brings out the dirt is the issa of schita mishum alabein. Rubbing is an issa itself of shifshuf. That's the issa of kibbutz. Shaking off dust or any item that's embedded in the garment, according to Rashi, is a malacha deraisa, and that's what we paskin. Shaking out water, snow, rain from that's absorbed in a garment is also a malacha for itself. That's all agree. A food, mud that's on a garment, taking off the above surface and leaving the stain is not a malacha at all. Not pshat because it's still dirty, but you didn't do a malacha at all. Taking inverting the beged and basically the food falls off, but the stain remains, is really a gemara, and that's why that would be mutter. Even without fully cleaning a stain by treating it partially or certainly adding water to a stain is an issa. The only het is if you didn't do a ma'isa kibbutz in the first place. A water stain, adding water again, leave the stain, after Shabbos will come out. But something that's above the surface, like feathers, crumbs, dandruff typically is above the surface, that's not a problem of a libun in the first place. A hat that's dirty, the real approach is it's a covered Shabbos hat, leave it, people understand. But if there's a Gavaldig Kvayt Abrius, there are those that are Mekel Aidei Akum. A hat brush should not be used even if there's no Issa of Libun, because that's over the Choyel. Baby powder, confectioner's sugar is a problem because it gets into the fabric, it's like dust. There are 3 eitzes to avoid the shilas. Put your hat in a safe place, take something in between you and the child, and of course, when you're preparing food, make sure that it won't make the garments dirty. Don't rely on nisim. Put it on an apron if need be, but stay away from potential problems. Blowing off dust of a hat, the chayr should be mutter. Sticker or a wax that's stuck on and taking part of the fiber is a problem of libun. Gum and taffy on a carpet is a problem. On a table, on any flat surface is fine. Shaking off snow that started to melt should be considered like Manar Talisay Mintal, a very serious issa. Plastic meal or any plastic hat covering is okay. Soft contacts, you should definitely be careful to use only the moisturizer. Food, the problem of toichin is an interesting problem, but the place says you should be chayshish for that. even though ein teichen achat teichen. If it's a real kvoid habriyos, a person can have a guy do even malacha deraisa. We rely on shvus b'makam kvoid habriyos. A shoe or dust, a shoe that has dust or dirt or excrement, all this is not a problem because there's no din shasei or kibusay unless a person rubs vigorously. It's mutter.
Excuse me. I don't understand how you classify moichet amanasi. Okay, but how you explained it.